Thank you, Arist. I'll try to be engaging. The after lunch hour is especially challenging, but I really have to commend you all for being here, and Arist and his colleagues for pulling this together. We talk about the ATSC 3.0 bubble. Well, the bubble has just been extended and has engulfed you in it, so welcome. I have to say, I had an uneventful flight this morning from National Airport in Washington. We landed, small commuter plane, and we were on the tarmac, and they opened the door, and the gate agent came in, and she and the flight attendant were just looking out the door, and nothing was happening, and a woman next to me had on a surgical mask. So I go to the gate agent, and I say, what's going on? What's the delay? And she said, well, there's a plane loading over there, and we don't want any cross-contamination. And I said, are you worried about the coronavirus? She said, no, we're worried about Americans being on this plane. After one beat, she started laughing, but she said, you know, we have this, you're roaming the tarmac and you have to go right to arrivals, and we can't let you out there until all the planes are buttoned up. But when I got to the kiosk and had to answer questions about arrival in Canada, are you bringing firearms or produce or drugs, I realized maybe she wasn't kidding. So I run, yes, the Advanced Warning and Response Network, AWARN Alliance. We're a totally voluntary alliance of commercial broadcasters, public broadcasters, consumer electronics makers, B2B tech companies. Our members are highly represented in the speakers you've heard today, and I appreciate the references to advanced alerting from the people I've heard and that went before me. 3.0 emergency alerting is getting real. Our colleagues in Korea launched 3.0 so their people could see the Winter Olympics in 4K. A couple of months ago, they created a new application for it, and they are using it in Seoul now. The target devices are outdoor signage, but they will be extending that as well. So we also have the NAB, the Consumer Technology Association, a pretty good cross-section in terms of membership. Pearl, you heard from Dave Sigler, they're 8 of the largest companies. So we're international. Not only do we have Korean representation, but we have some new members from Japan, and we're excited about that because their ambition is to make 3.0 adaptable and interoperable with other standards, W3C, 3GPP, their own standard for television broadcasting, and of course the Japanese definitely know a thing or two about emergency alerting. So our goals have expanded a bit over the past year. Alerting remains our central focus. I'll talk a lot about alerting. There's a lot of room for improvement, but we also are looking at what happens after the alert, the continuing news and information needs. And this not only solves a real problem, serves a need for that kind of information, but it also frankly creates a business incentive for participation in our alliance, in that news and information are the lifeblood of local broadcasters, and with 3.0 they can extend that franchise. And so we are working to develop a framework for news directors and others to work together to combine official governmental information, for example, with newsroom product. And we will use 3.0. We don't even have the terminology for it yet. We call it a feed or a stream or RSS, but it'll be an opt-in service for people after the alert is distributed. And to do this, we formed an advisory group, and these are some of the thought leaders in the TV news business, and we said we want to convene some roundtables and have a discussion about how to create this framework And the first thing we learned was that the awareness of 3.0 next-gen TV among the television news community was extremely low. That there was a crying need for just some basic education. So we began planning and produced a series of webinars last summer. Madeline kindly was a presenter and gave a very good overview of 3.0, a non-technical overview. She can swing both ways. It can be technical or non-technical. These were billed as non-technical, and we had just a great response. We had over 200 registrants. Most people actually watched at least 40 minutes. We got 5 stars from everybody who rated us, and the big number here was the answer to this question, which we asked during the webinars. Do you believe that next-gen TV is a game changer for TV news? And I don't know about Canada, but you can't get 96% of Americans to agree on anything these days, so we were floored by that. But it told us we're definitely headed in the right direction, and our advisory, our steering committee, which functions as our board, has directed us to continue our non-technical education, and we'd love to include anybody north of the border if you guys want to be part of that. We'd be glad to distribute information to join us. So the thought leader roundtables are all about creating this voluntary framework. What you saw from Chandra earlier today is very relevant in terms of accessing a whole range of content. When we start talking to the news directors, they want to talk about workflow. And one of them put it I had a panel at a conference in Chicago, and he said, the news director, it reminds him today where the news community is with next-gen TV, where they were at the very beginning of social media and the web. Back in the day when social media and the web was just one more damn thing that the newsroom has to worry about, and now, of course, it's the lifeblood of what they do, and that next-gen could become the same thing. We're looking to create automated workflows that can aggregate content from a variety of sources: weather, traffic, hospital wait times, evacuation routes. Typically, this would be information after the alert. You'll see the UX for the alert is very different from what we're talking about for this ongoing news and information. And we've had our first roundtables. I can tell you that we've got a ways to go to really coalesce the news community around how to use this powerful new technology. We had a roundtable in a major market with some leading news directors, and one of them from a big O&O station said he had to Google what ATSC 3.0 was before the meeting. He had heard of it, but he just needed to know more about it. So fortunately, ATSC, under Madeline's leadership, has made education one of their goals, and we're going to be working together to really penetrate deep into our industry beyond the CTOs. So alerting today, let's sort of set the table. Everybody in Canada, I know, was brought up probably with something called the Halifax disaster. I wasn't aware of it until very recently. For the Americans here, this was a French ship during World War I that was loaded with explosives and ammunition and volatile chemicals that collided with another ship in Halifax Harbor, and the ship caught on fire. The crew abandoned the ship, which promptly drifted into a pier. And correct me if I'm wrong, Canadians, but a lot of people gathered on the pier to watch the burning ship, and then it blew up. And you can see from the graphic, if you see the word tsunami, yeah, I mean, that's the kind of explosion what it was. It displaced so much water that it created a tsunami, and about 2,000 people died and thousands more were injured. I bring this up because a great book I read called Unthinkable documented this, and this reporter wrote this book, and it's all about the way people respond in emergencies. And this is considered the first disaster study. There happened to be an Anglican priest there named Samuel Henry Prince. And Reverend Prince not only was in the response, the immediate response, but he wrote about the incident for his doctoral dissertation at Columbia a couple of years later. And one of the things he found is that people don't usually panic in emergencies, contrary to what I assumed and what most people assume. In emergencies, people typically are actually better to each other than we are in our day-to-day lives. Even in Halifax, the people who immediately got to work triaging the survivors were those who didn't have any family or relationships in the city. Everybody else ran home to check on the family. These are people that didn't have any real social connections, but they were there. He said within 5 hours, they had an organized response. And then aid poured in from all over the country, from the United States. And you see that time and again. She points out who made it from the 9/11 towers and who didn't, among those who were lucky enough not to be killed in the initial impacts. But what people do is delay. They delay taking action. This issue has been studied. There was money from the 2007 Spectrum auction to explore social behavioral issues around the short message wireless alerts, and I know you've got them too. Dr. Dennis Milletti, University of Colorado, Professor Emeritus, is kind of the dean of this school, and he coined this term milling. People delay taking action. They want confirmation, they interact with others, they want more information. You could call it sense-making, but it can be fatal. And the object of emergency alerting is to get people to take some action, evacuating or whatever it is, or sheltering in place. And specifically, they found that the short message alerts, we call them WEAs, wireless emergency alerts, lead to a lot of milling. We strongly support WEAs. They're definitely a lifesaver, but people need more information to be able to take the action that can get them out of harm's way. This is the other system we have in the U.S. This is the Legacy Emergency Alert System. This literally goes back to the Cold War. I've said to our friends in the consumer electronics industry and cable, I've actually used it to needle cable a little bit. This is going to look great in 4K. This is, you can see this today. This one just happens to be from 2014. The problem is this system was designed for a very different use case. It literally dates to 1949 when the Soviets exploded their atomic bomb, and Fred Baumgartner, who works in Next Gen TV at Sinclair, calls this the EOW use case, end of the world. For those of you who are curious, this is a shot of the Tsar Bomba, which was the largest explosion ever created by man. This is from 100 miles away, and it was designed to intimidate the young president, but a year later they found out he wasn't intimidated. But there is no geographic targeting. It's a very blunt instrument. It's almost never used. The FCC does regulate this. Stations have to maintain premises-based equipment. They have to test it periodically. But I've talked to a lot of people at TV stations and a lot of people in emergency management, and EAS is considered the least useful tool because of that lack of geographic targeting and specific information. This is the WEA, and this is an actual Amber Alert, and this is what you get. Now the FCC, against the very loud and enduring protests of the wireless industry, has upped the number of characters. They've improved geo-targeting, but you still see the same problem that leads to milling. And it's sometimes even the short message doesn't get out. wildfires, and I saw Jerry's deck, these towers burn up. I mean, literally, cell service burns up. There's a lot of talk about 5G, which I'm sure will be terrific. But if you think about it, after something like Superstorm Sandy, it took weeks or months to rebuild cellular infrastructure, and they could roll in these cellular on light trucks, cellular on wheels, colts and cows, they call them, and gradually brought the service back up. But in a 5G world, you've got hundreds or you've got thousands of transmitters. How do you restore service in that environment? Sometimes to prevent fires, like in California, when they cut power to regions, because the power line infrastructure is so out of date, it creates fires. So they turn off power, but then people lose service. It's not just the states. 2 clicks, I found this from the Fort McMurray wildfire. I don't have any, I'm not making any judgments about any performance or lack of here, but it's just, this is a worldwide problem when these things hit. So one of the advantages beyond what Next Gen brings is just that broadcasting is highly survivable infrastructure. Towers are reinforced. They very rarely go down. Stations have days or weeks of diesel fuel reserves. This slide is from the FCC. This is the day, from the day that Hurricane Irma hit southwestern Florida. You can see the red or reddish images there. Those are the counties. The redder they are, the greater the failure of the cell service. And while that was happening, every TV station on the state, except one, stayed on the air that day. We also, a new threat has emerged to the wireless alert system. Some researchers at the University of Colorado last year rolled in a cow, cellular on wheels, and put it adjacent to the football stadium. And fortunately it was empty, but they created these hack messages, these fake messages. You can imagine the panic that could cause if that stadium had been full. I actually, I did a round of briefings of members of the FCC last year, and when I gave this example to Commissioner O'Reilly, he immediately wanted to start an enforcement action for piracy, for operating a cell tower, but that wasn't their point. They were actually doing research after the Hawaii false alert, and I heard just talking now to the deans in Oris that there had been a fake, not fake, but a false nuclear alert here in Canada a couple of weeks ago. So one of the things I've learned is that one of the biggest problem with alerting is over alerting, and that's why things like Hawaii or the nuclear alert here, the false alert, are so harmful. But the over alerting usually comes from a lack of geographic targeting. It's very interesting. Congress now has legislation. It passed the Senate last year. I think it'll pass this year. Among other things, it would. This was introduced by the senator from Hawaii. It would require this. It would require the FCC to report to Congress on how the streaming companies are going to do localized alerting. From what I understand, it's pretty tricky to do that over the internet. So I have suggested that we explore an approach, assuming that 3.0 takes off, which I think it will. It won't just be TVs. There will be small transition devices. We call them gateways. They could receive, can always be listening for the signal off air, can incorporate Ethernet, and then it rebroadcasts everything in the home as Wi-Fi. But it could be an elegant solution to this problem that you might be binge watching season 2 of Game of Thrones. It doesn't matter. The alert will be overlaid on your screen and on any device in the home that's receiving Wi-Fi. So I really believe that we're on the, something has changed in the last couple of years. When we launched this a few years ago, it was built on a lot of prior work, but we weren't explicitly talking about resilience to global warming, but that's real. I mean, it's beginning to color everything we do. The Australia fires, the California fires, the floods, it's not going to stop. And we have to become resilient. The human species is very good at adapting. And even if we stopped all CO2 emissions tomorrow, the global temperature is going to keep rising. And we have to adapt. And there's a model of resilience that says there are 3 pillars. One is social integration. Are people connected? If you have to evacuate your home, do you have a place to evacuate to? Does someone remember the senior citizen down the street when it's time to send the boat? The second is technological integration. Can you maintain contact with that community? Can the civil authorities and the media get information to people that they need to stay alive or recover? And the third is just the physical and mental adaptive ability of individuals. That's probably the toughest one to solve. All the health statistics in America, or many of them, are trending in the wrong way. So that's an issue, but I do believe that social integration is something that we can affect. That's what I said I spoke to the public broadcasters last night. They're very good at bringing communities together. I think they can play a role in that. Halifax told us that people will come together, but the more that they're already connected, the more successful they're going to be. But technological integration, we can play a big role in that. We can maintain that lifeline of information to people, even if the grid is down and the internet is down. So I'm not going to repeat what was laid out by the other speakers about 3.0, but I do want to apply this specifically to alerting. Geo-targeting reduces over-alerting, which is the biggest problem in alerting. Rich media, we're sending content that is cached on the device. It doesn't come at you all at once, but it'll present you with a menu to access. It won't just say evacuate now. It'll allow you to see the evacuation route, the shelter location, can I get back in my neighborhood, whatever information. It's not just an Amber Alert, an 8-year-old child is missing. It's a photo of the kid, that kind of thing. Multilingual and accessible. I just have to commend the ATSC, the community, the global community of ATSC, because when they began devising this new system, 3.0, they baked advanced alerting into every feature. I mean, it is just ready for giving us as a society a major upgrade to alerting. And all of these features were built in there deliberately. They have a dual use, of course. I mean, if you're geographically targeting an emergency alert, you can geographically target an ad. But it was an intentional way to make this system capable of really improving the way we do alerting. Device wake up, all IP integration with social media. I mean, there's a model where Indonesia tracks flooding from typhoons and monsoons by asking people. At one time, they were the most Twitter-dense city in the world, and they would ask people to make sure their GPS, their location was enabled, and they would send them words over the media, the one-to-many media. Tweet where you are using these words, and they could create a heat map of where the flooding was. So that's a perfect example of what we can do with NextGen and a more continuous relationship. We have a lot of support from the 911 call centers. The APCO represents them, and probably here too, they're international. They like us because whenever something happens, they're inundated with phone calls. They even have their own term for the problem. They call it TDOS, Telephony Denial of Service. After the Hawaii alert, thousands of calls rolled over to 1-800 call center in Colorado, and then calls kept coming, and they stranded 6,000 calls that they know of. I mean, it happens all the time. If you can push out the basic information that people need, then they don't have to call 911, and you reserve that for the urgent care needs. So Madeline, I've got this slide which you created, which I like. I think of what I do, and AWARN is sort of the liberal arts side of ATSC. We're not the technical people. We've got the best in the world for that, but we are working on the user experience, the UX, the design, the framework of how this will work in terms of the workflow. And the interesting thing about this chart, let me see if I can get this laser pointer to work here. There it is. Don't tell my cat I'm doing this. He'll get jealous. Notice that in the EAS today, the station is getting content from one source. In the United States, the only thing they have to carry is a message from the President of the United States, the EOW message. Fortunately, it's never been used. But in what we're creating allows the station to take content from a wide range of sources. And the B2B companies are creating the infrastructure within the station transmission chain to put it all together. And they can send it out over the air, over the internet. We're really creating a very holistic system here. Our goal is to create a framework or a set of best practices so that every station or group doesn't have to reinvent the wheel. We'd like to have some direction, some agreed upon direction for how stations will implement something like this, because it's all voluntary. We've never asked for or received $1 of federal support for what we're doing. However, I do believe that the federal government has a role. Personally, I'd like to see greater federal leadership. It might happen if the White House changes, but right now there's very little input from our federal government. But I have talked to people I know at the National Science Foundation and the Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate. They need to do the social science side of this. They need to do the behavioral research. They need to tell us how to design alerts that achieve what we need. We'll take care of the rest of it. So let's look at our progress to date. So this was the first sort of laboratory bench prototype, and we worked very closely with Jerry and Sinclair's WJLA as we produced these. These first prototypes were created by LG in Lincolnshire and Korea, and you can see that we took exactly the same content that would be generated for an Amber Alert. We worked very closely. The people who generated the alerts in the U.S. is the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The alerts are typically sent by the state police, and they go statewide. They're not otherwise geographically targeted, but nevertheless, we just took the content directly from that, and then the center created these images for us. These are not real people, but this is an example of, instead of a 90-character child missing, 1985 Chevy, we can give you this is rich media. This is dense information about the child. Just for safety, I'm not taking you through all of these, but we've got the same thing for the vehicle and the suspects. So that was our first try, and then in 2017-18, we went to the next level, and with the support of NAB Pilot, Zeta Manson's a contractor. She worked with us in the National Center, and we created the first HTML5 based alerts. This is a very, very important point, and I have to acknowledge the work of Canadians in this. We now know that the alert has to have a common look and feel. Anybody here from the government knows about the common look and feel? You've had working groups that have worked on the proposition that people, when they get an alert, they have to know it's an alert. It needs to look like an alert. They need to recognize it. It doesn't matter which station or which device or where they are. And to get that consistency, if you leave it up to each television set manufacturer to render the information natively, the receiver app, as we sometimes call it, you're going to get different stuff. It'll be the same information, but the layout will be different. HTML5, which is a marriage between 3.0 and W3C standards, allows us to lay it out in a certain way. So we made this up, just like the first version. We decided, well, not totally. We have the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We thought that it would be better to put these icons at the bottom of the screen. You're watching the game, and this is the Capitals, by the way. This would appear at the bottom. And if you want more information, this is optimized for a 16:9 layout on a TV screen using a remote. And we give the station the option of picture-in-picture. They could use it for their own news. Typically, web clips they're constantly producing, or they could go live, or they could have regular programming. But it's still, we call this the L bar, and it's interesting that in the UXs we've seen from Korea and Japan, they use the same basic approach. But we're still guessing at what this design should be. So we went on the road, and we had a series of workshops, let's call them focus group light, with emergency managers in these 4 regions. We had great participation. No one has ever told me that geographically targeted rich media alerting is not needed. The question I get is, when can we get it? So we asked these people to advise us, and we went into their jurisdictions and asked them to give us a use case. New York gave us a dirty bomb for Manhattan. But these people collectively handle emergency alerting for 43 million people. And we had a team, notably here, middle right, Dr. Jeanette Sutton is a well-known professor of risk communication, a disciple of Dr. Milletti, who came up with the term milling, and Dewey Reed, lower right, he's the former executive creative director for CNN. And Dewey took CNN from 2 platforms to 33 around the world, mobile, cable, satellite, whatever. And this is what we began testing with them. And we actually wrote up our findings in a document we shared with our membership, not meaning this at all to be the final, but we need real consumer testing to create something final, but it did give us some valuable feedback. I won't go through that, but these are sort of the micro findings, or macro findings rather. We heard almost universally about the very deep informal relationships between the emergency managers and the local TV news departments. There's always wariness among the politicians about the TV station because they think they might get a black eye from the news coverage, which is a real possibility. But in terms of alerting and public safety, these people really work together. And it's done with emails and phone calls and texts and beers after work. And it creates the foundation to create this framework that we're talking about that might be more automated and more of a continuous relationship in terms of connectivity. They believe that if you're going to interrupt a program with a banner, that it should only be for the most serious urgent alert. They call these imminent threat alerts. The fire is coming up the canyon. The rupture has happened off the coast of Washington, Oregon, British Columbia. There's going to be a tsunami 5 stories high in 15 minutes. Those kinds of things. You know, we can wake up devices, technically. With 3.0, we can wake up devices, and the manufacturers have been extremely wary about that. I found out these emergency managers are even more wary than they are. A guy in Phoenix said, if my living room TV woke me up at 2 a.m. for an Amber Alert, I'd throw the damn thing out the window, 4K or not. Geo-targeting is essential to reduce over-alerting, and we can get pretty granular. The idea is you put geocodes in the alert, And the device, no matter what it is, knows where it is, and so it matches up physically. The alert goes through the whole viewing area, but the device matches up the geocodes to its location. And if it's in the danger zone, and the polygon, as the National Weather Service calls it, for the tornado track, you get the alert, otherwise you don't. Co-branding has to be an option. Not all stations do news, but those who do are very sensitive about this. But even they sometimes don't want their brand. They don't want their brand on an alert to evacuate the beach, for example. So it's an option. And then the common look and feel is extremely important. And it's not just our opinion. This is pretty well understood by people in the government and elsewhere. So this is the most recent UX. The banner appears. I'm not using video, but take my word for it. This is video, and this banner appears. This was Dewey's idea to put it in the middle. The top is reserved for the legacy EAS, even though it's hardly ever used. We have to, by regulation, keep that free. The bottom third could be breaking news, or, you know, the Raptors won another NBA championship. I did pull for them, by the way. It could be anything, but the alert, the banner appears in the middle, and it's minimal. We know from the social science about the WIA that the source of the alert is very important. It gets really tricky, though. You get into Los Angeles, there's 40 jurisdictions that could issue the alert. They don't all have brands, they don't all have logos. This is, you know, something we have to figure out. But in this case, we worked very closely with KEYT TV, which is a News Press Gazette station in Santa Barbara, the leading news station. They have a 3.0 transmitter on the air. And we worked with the Santa Barbara County Office of Emergency Management. Now, what happens in that part of the world is they have these devastating fires. They had the Thomas Fire in 2017, the largest fire in California history, until 2018. But then the rains come, and then they have these debris flows, and people die in the fires. They die in the mudslides, and so they've gotten pretty rehearsed at this. But this UX also gives you a chance to get out of it. You can use your remote to get more information. It's being cached in the memory of your device, no matter what it is. Or you can get out of it. You can get out of it. Ideally, you're not going to get it unless you're in the danger zone, but you always have that chance to get out of it. I got an Amber Alert probably a year ago. I live near the Potomac River in Virginia. This skipped over from National Harbor in Maryland, where they have the big MGM casino. It was about an Amber Alert from the Maryland State Police. I know better, but I touched it, thinking it would give me more information. No, of course, it was just the 90 characters. I was over-alerted. But rather than give me more information, the Apple default was to take me to the settings to turn it off. So we have to give people a way to get out of the alert without turning off alerting in the settings. In reality, people will have a lot of discretion over the level of warning that they want. So you click, you click, I want more information, and then this map was created by the Office of Emergency Management. It's one of the best I've seen. If you had a bigger scale, you'd see a giant burn scar up above this area, but these are the canyons where all the debris comes down when it starts raining. And we can transmit this. We have to put "you are here." We know that about maps. People can't read maps unless you tell them where they are in relation to the other information. And it can give you that kind of information. This was an actual event in February of last year. No one got hurt, but it did close part of the 101 highway. We can give them shelter locations, and of course, you can always go picture in picture with the news if they're doing that, or continued programming. You know, on the left there at the bottom, take shelter address. You can see a use case where somebody's going out the door. You grab the dog and get out the door. Now, which way do I go and where do I go? they can have that sent to their phone if it's operational. Now, post-disaster, this is what I'm talking about, moving beyond the alert. The alert, I think, will always be seen as a bit of a governmental thing, but this is getting into the real business of station news. Post-disaster, this might appear as a small icon. Again, we're making this up, but this UX has a small icon. If you want more information, something new that's come up, you can click on it. And we would see this as automated. This would be taking the kinds of feeds that Chandra was talking about, and instead of someone in the station having to create these, or not. I mean, there's many different ways you can do it. Or you can go to live programming. This speaks to that informal relationship between the station and the EM. It could be more formalized for events like this. So on the newsroom side, to wrap up here, the subject of our discussions, these roundtables we've had, have all been about workflow. How do you introduce this concept of next generation alerting and news and information into the newsroom without people thinking it's just another thing they have to do? And so there's a lot of software out there for producing news and television programs. There's still gaps even in the most sophisticated stations I've been to. I still see producers copying from one app and pasting in another. Same thing with the emergency managers, but the idea of this came from Lane Michelson at Sinclair Broadcast Group. So we're recruiting industry thought leaders for the next phase of these discussions, and hope to produce some sort of best practices document sometime this year. But there are interops. There's a lot going on right now. ATSC set up a leadership planning team, which we're excited about, which is coalescing a lot of thought about what the service and product roadmap will be. And also the whole focus is expanding globally. And this speaks to what I was talking about earlier with global warming. This is a problem we all face. In 1958, Japan had an immense typhoon that killed 12,000 people. They had one of similar power and size that hit Tokyo several months ago. They lost 88 people, and that's because they improved their alerting. And flash flooding is the most difficult alerting use case. And then those of you at CES may have seen that the World Bank had announced with CTA that they are standing up a global tech challenge with 3 goals, 3 focus areas. One is gender equality, the other is healthcare, and the other is resilience to global warming. And so there's quite a bit of interest in our membership and others in looking at what we could do with resilience. In closing, we're a voluntary organization. The reality is that both the broadcasting and the consumer electronics industry made promises to the FCC that if they approve the voluntary use of ATSC 3.0, that we would do advanced emergency alerting, and we are keeping those promises. If we don't, then I believe it will be regulated. It will be mandated by the government. As long as we can stay ahead of it, we're going to have outcomes that work for the industry and are organic to what our industry will do with 3.0 on the business side. And so we need support, and we would welcome any of you to join our alliance and be part of our thought leadership. I mean, we're creating something new from scratch, and we need the best minds. And this is me. So thank you very much. Horace, we have time for questions.
So do you have any Canadian?
Sir?
Yeah, quick question. Who polices the message itself? How do you validate the message that it's accurate? Like, if the police do it, there's a perception that the police have factual content. And I'm concerned about so much misinformation
So the short answer is no one right now. But Dave Siegler talked about something very, very important, content protection. So I gave the example, University of Colorado, people hacked mobile. With content protection, perhaps you could eliminate that. You have trust certificates so that only authorized alert originators could get the message out. I mean, that would be one approach. I mean, it's a powerful, very powerful tool. You have to be careful. You don't want to create barriers with people receiving it. But, I mean, it's a legitimate point. And sometimes the people who are authorized to send them screw up, like the nuclear alert here, the Hawaii alert. I mean, it's, another thing I've learned, I've learned a lot talking to these people. It's very, very hard for those alert guys to press the send button. In my city of Alexandria, Virginia, I talked to a guy Saturday at an event. He turns out to be the head of communications for the city. He's the guy who presses the send button. And he said it's damn hard because, number one, we don't know where it goes. It's going to cross jurisdictions. We hate that. We don't want it to go into Fairfax County or Maryland. Secondly, there's always this trade-off between accuracy and speed. And I mean, this is the reality for the broadcaster. So there was an incident last year where a station in Illinois, I believe, and our broadcasters can correct me on this, they interrupted the season finale of The Bachelor for a tornado alert and caught hell. I mean, they had a lot of angry people interrupting The Bachelor. The tornado, of course, affected only one small area of the viewing area, and the meteorologist and the company stood behind him, said, tough, we're going to alert those people. Maybe it's just going to affect somebody in a trailer park, but we're going to alert. NBC affiliate in Dallas, Dallas Cowboys, tornado alert, again, a bad one. Every station in the market, then, as I understand the story, alerted, except the NBC, or let's say a network affiliate, did not interrupt the game, and they caught hell for it. So alerting is tough. I mean, it's a hard business, and I believe there should be more leadership from our government, one way or the other. But I think we're kind of in this. We got to figure it out ourselves. Yes, sir.
Two questions. Just on that, the last point, are you working with the authorities to establish protocols and frames of reference that speak to the potential of geo-positioning announcements? And secondly, do you have partners in Canada and Mexico that you're working on this with? You talked about Korea and Japan.
So the first question, after the Hawaii event, Congress passed legislation that reauthorized FEMA, Federal Emergency Management Agency, which inherited the old civil defense emergency alert, nuclear alert thing. And I was actually appointed by the FEMA administrator to an advisory committee, and we worked for a year and a half, and we made a lot of recommendations about standardizing the alerts and establishing the protocols and testing it. And to my knowledge, nothing has happened. So we're not getting very far with that. I would love to, Jerry's sort of my ally in this kind of thing. We don't talk about mandates, but we need a leadership. There's something there. I would like to, and we've, to be truthful, the broadcasters in America, half of their money comes from retransmission consent from cable. So some of them are not real reluctant to push AWARN as a driver of cord cutting, but I'm beginning to see 3.0 more as an overlay. It's a network of networks. It's like a mesh network where 3.0 is ubiquitous. Even intelligent transportation, that's all short range stuff. That goes out. 3.0 is there. Cellular's out, or it's all integrated. So I think that's a good way to think about it. I mean, I'd like to see it go that way. Regarding our partnerships, we have a great new partner with the Japanese. They joined around NAB last year and have come in with money and ideas, and they've got a lot to their system. They know that 3.0 is the best system in the world They had it until 3.0 came along. They want to adapt it for other systems. The Koreans are going forward. We don't have relationships with Canada or Europe right now. Although I was approached at CES from a gentleman from a big, one of the leading companies in this space from Europe, who told me the EBU is very interested in using DTT, they call it, for alerting. So we're open. We're an open membership. We're international. It's very easy to join us. And so it's just is very ad hoc. There is an organization called Future Broadcast TV, I think, FOBTV. They've done some work in this area, but my hope is that Madeline is going to wrangle everybody together. Jerry?
Just a footnote with respect to the international capabilities. Once ITU last month approved ATSC 3 as an international standard, it emboldened countries like the Caribbean countries that are disparate. They don't have a cellular infrastructure. They do have the capability of, because broadcasting spectrum has been allocated all over Region 2, which is the Western Hemisphere, and they are looking at the emergency capabilities of 3.0, especially because of the hurricanes that devastate the islands, and to have the emergency alerting functions now approved by the ITU. These countries are now looking to say, okay, if we go ahead and move from analog to digital, let's bypass ATSC 1, let's bypass DVB or any of the other standards that are out there. Let's go right to ATSC 3 because of the rich media capabilities that you articulately put forth.
Jerry's been the real ambassador for 3.0 around the globe. And Jerry, what does it mean that was 3.0 recognized by ITU, or what exactly was the mechanism?
So the ITU, it's on. So ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, is a subunit of the United Nations. It harmonizes the use of frequencies around the planet. It's divided the world into 3 regions. This is Region 2, the North and South America, and the Europeans and the Africans are another region, and then the Far East is a 3rd region. And when the ITU endorses what's called a recommended standard, it then is, as I mentioned this morning, is sort of like a good housekeeping seal of approval. We have now approved the use of this standard for digital terrestrial transmission services. And ITU, there was a recommendation, it was actually a DVB, a European recommendation for the next generation of digital transmission in Europe called DVB-T2. And we sort of used that vehicle, that recommendation, to amend and put an annex on that recommendation to include ATSC 3, and we used a little device, ATSC 3, remember we showed you the big stack of the 21 standards? Well, there's one standard right at the beginning, the A300 standard, which is really everything, right? It's all of the standards all rolled up into one. And we got the ATU to include A300 as an amendment to this DVB recommendation. And so now with a vote by all of the world's countries last December, they have adopted that. And so now ATSC 3 is a recognized, one of the 4 recognized recommended standards for use around the world.
Thanks. There's also a standards body called Oasis, and they came up with something called the Common Alerting Protocol. That was after 9/11. So there are structures out there as well. Anybody else? Yes, sir. Back.
You thought that was very interesting. I just wondered if there was any initiative or consideration from your organization in using these warning systems for like smart devices like Google Home, Alexa, and stuff like that, so that people actually hear the alerts being spoken to them.
I mean, that's a great point, and I'm not aware of anything specifically, but I would bet dollars to donuts that our broadcasters are talking to those companies about commercial models. But this gets to the overlay idea, where 3.0 is kind of a ubiquitous signal that's always out there. Even if people aren't watching it, are using it to watch TV, the device is listening. And it might be a home gateway, a standalone device that's also got Ethernet plugged into it. It might be Alexa. I mean, part of it is, like my vision would be to get everybody in the room and say, how can we make this work? Here's another example. So say that we start producing these, we call them AWARN's an idea. It's kind of a branding, I guess, for this idea, a concept. But the AWARN alert, say that we convince a carrier to put a 3.0 tuner in a phone. There's a tornado coming. Is somebody going to get a wireless alert and the AWARN alert? Somebody's got to be a traffic cop there, and make that work out. I mean, my hope would be the either voluntarily or feeling the heat that the streaming companies could take leadership, because we all, I mean, I'm the father of 20-year-olds, and when they were in high school in the basement with the headphones on doing their streaming with people around the globe, you could have an EF5 tornado coming down the street and take off the house before they knew there was anything out there. So you got to figure out a way to really get to people where they are. So yeah, it's got to be an integrated approach. Jerry?
John, you might want to mention the distinction, although subtle, important, the distinction between alerting and information, advanced emergency alerting and information. AWARN, as I understand it, as you and I have talked many times, is not a substitute for the government. It's not a substitute for WIA. It's not a substitute for EAS. We're not going to recreate the wheel. But what ATSC 3 allows is the information part of that. You might want to address that.
Yeah, so the alert, even if we do it the way we want to do it, which we will, rich media, our UX, all of that, I think it will always be seen as kind of a governmental thing, because it'll be a governmental authority that's pressing that button. They have to do it in concert with the broadcasters, just like they have to use cell carrier infrastructure for the WIAs. The information part is where the broadcasters can really step up to add value, because they've got the newsroom, they've got these informal relationships. Just because you get the alert, that doesn't mean it's all over. I mean, even if it's a short-term event like a tornado, are there gas leaks? Are there fires? What are the hospital wait times? What do you do for people with glass in their eye? I mean, there's a million things you could do. I hate to talk about it, but active shooter, there's nothing we can really do in terms of the alert, but there's a lot that we could do after the thing has started or happened. Typically, parents rush toward the school, and it interferes with response, first responders getting in. I mean, that's the kind of thing you could do. I mean, there's also all sorts of first responder models. That's not our particular focus, but it's the same technology. Say in an evacuation order, the alert is to evacuate this part of a city. We might use that same system, which is intended for the public on a geographically targeted basis, to give the police 5 minutes warning to set up the roadblocks. You just encrypt it. I mean, Hollywood's making sure that we're encrypting, right? So, yeah, there's a lot of different ways to skin that cat. But the information right now, it drives the authorities crazy, because something happens and then you get all this crap on social media. One of the reasons I was giving a presentation now, 7 years ago, when we had a mobile kind of a 2.0, let's call it, version of what we're doing. And the deputy police superintendent from Boston was given a debrief on the Boston Marathon bombing. And he had heard me give this presentation. He stopped his slide presentation and pointed at me and said, that guy, we want that AWARN thing. We need it, because he said he was at the finish line and it was so chaotic he didn't even know there was a second bomb. And he said their two-way radios worked, but they were useless because so many people were on them. And then social media put out photos of two guys who were the suspects, who weren't the suspects. And the police felt helpless to overcome that. So there's a lot that we can do in terms of being a better partner and making sure that the right information gets out there. Jerry?
John, you may also want to mention using conditional access, which is part of ATSC 3, the ability to give information to the police departments if they're going into a school that you can download mobile,
Yeah.
not just in a fixed way, but to their mobile applications, the blueprints of the school or so forth.
Yeah, and we've got, the public station in Las Vegas is doing that with OneO. They've got a library of all the blueprints for schools in a shooting situation or fire situation. The fire truck can pull up and download the blueprints to every major building in the city. I think another thing that's, I think one of the sleeper apps for 3.0 is going to be intelligent transportation. And there's a lot of conversation about in-car entertainment. Jerry and his company are doing a lot around firmware downloads and navigational downloads to all those cars. But the people who write their RFPs for these big transportation projects, the public side, this, think Regional Transportation Authority, they need a way to reach all these cars at the same time, humans and robots, and give them information about getting around a hazard or a work zone or something like that. So there was a spectrum auction in the States in 2012, and the whole background was the chairman of the FCC was saying there was a spectrum crisis and we're going to be left behind in 4G or whatever G they were talking about, and we had to, that broadcasting is dying. It's a dinosaur technology. Well, number one, even then there were like 12% of Americans used over-the-air television, and they tended to be down market. Like half of people who spoke Spanish at home. So that was kind of elitist, but the economics were all wrong. We had this big auction and it fell flat. Some spectrum got sold. T-Mobile now is running these ads about 600 megahertz spectrum. They were one of the buyers. They talk about how far it'll go. It's beachfront property, but in reality, the broadcasters are figuring out a lot of ways to use that value. So, I think we're building this very powerful system, and I think the apps are going to come. But I've been on panel after panel where our technical colleagues will turn to me and say, we like what AWARN is doing because it's a very clear use case, and that was the title of my theme. This is a very clear use case for next gen, and if we can, there's tremendous synergies between creating a geo-targeted rich media learning system and all the business models out there. And that's what we have to pull. That's what we are doing. We're staying in concert along those lines. Did I have another question? All right, well, thank you very much. Great discussion.